CNN has actually covered the Andi Ngo incident a decent amount. I'm actually kind of impressed. I think they could have done a better job. It does kind of suck we're at the point where we're surprised CNN reports on a journalist being attacked by extremists, but I'm glad it's happening, and I'm not going to rag on them for doing the right thing. We have an op-ed here that actually calls for unmasking Antifa, and that's interesting that CNN runs this. I also have some updates on the lawsuit and compiling information on who Andi Ngo's lawyer is going to sue. So there's a big question that's been circulating, maybe not a question, but a call to action. People have been saying it's time to enforce anti-masking laws. In New York, you can't wear a mask in a group of 3 or more. It's like an anti-masquerading laws or something like that. A lot of people have argued it's unconstitutional. Well, at this point, I don't know what the other solution is, but maybe they shouldn't be allowed to wear masks. The Proud Boys don't wear masks, but the Proud Boys don't go out and start the fights. The Proud Boys go around, waving their little flags and marching through the streets, and Antifa shows up and fights them. You can disagree with the Proud Boys all day and night, but they're starting their own events. Whether or not unmasking is the right answer, I'm not sure, but let's take a look at this op-ed, and then we'll jump over to some of the updates on the lawsuit. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, the best thing you can do is just share this video. YouTube no longer suggests my content in the way they used to because I guess they don't like news and politics anymore. It's hitting everybody. But if you like my content, please share it to help spread the news. From CNN, we need to pay attention to the attack on Andi Ngo. Spot on. I completely agree, and it's about damn time. In the story, they write, nothing quite exemplifies tolerance like the video of masked young people hurling objects and screeching profanities at a young conservative journalist. The viral images are sickening. Andi Ngo, a photojournalist and editor at the online magazine Quillette, who has made a cottage industry of exposing instances of manufactured hate crimes, was viciously assaulted while covering an Antifa rally held as a counter-protest to a right-wing rally, of right-wing groups, including the Proud Boys in Portland, Oregon. They go on to explain what Antifa is. I get it. We know what Antifa is. The video shows masked protesters circling Ngo, punching and hitting him, and dousing him with a milkshake. Then following him as he flees, one hurls something at his back. Too often we are seeing yada yada. Regular and potentially lethal violence by masked protester assailants is too often excused and condoned by Twitter warriors. This must not be our new normal. Simply bearing a name that says you're opposed to evil, like anti-fascist, should not inure us to your unprovoked violence and unconstitutional attempts to block others' free speech rights. Everyone, right and left, must condemn and literally unmask this behavior, not glorify it for political ends. Whoa! I'm gonna give you a little applause here, CNN op-ed. I agree. Unmask the behavior, left or right, call out the violence, and defend free speech. Spot on. Never thought I'd be sitting here saying, good job, CNN, but here we are, and you know what? Respect where it is earned, credit where it is due. He says, Ngo also made several posts. Well, let's move on to the anti-masking stuff. He does add that according to police, they said that some milkshakes were laced with a substance similar to quick-drying cement. And so conservative journalists received his, in the view of these radical left protesters, quote, just desserts. He says, actually, I want to get to the anti-masking stuff specifically. Well, I'll just read it. It is no secret that in the post-Ferguson era of policing, many in law enforcement are worried about being accused of provoking protesters, even those who break the law in plain view of uniformed police. Former FBI Director James Comey described the phenomenon as the Ferguson effect of viral video effect. We exist in a structured civil society where lawful protests are considered one of the foundations of our nation. But some organizers ignore current laws and the get-go by failing to comply with a requirement to obtain a permit. The right to gather and protest is not absolute. Under the Constitution, the Supreme Court has found we all have the right to peaceably assemble, provided a permit is secured in advance, and all local laws are followed that mandate when and where the protest may take place. Too often, protesters of all stripes ignore these laws, choosing to mobilize via online appeals without involving government officials in their plans, or they defy the terms of their permit when a protest gets out of hand. What's more, for many of the current crop of young protesters, like some of those in Portland, attacking an unarmed journalist whose views they abhor is somehow noble and carries with it the breathtaking exhilaration of anonymity, courtesy of a face, scarf, or mask. Much simpler, when so adorned, to get away with saying and doing things that might arguably draw charges of incitement to riot. So here we go. Let's talk about anti-masking laws. Anti-masking laws are nothing new. An 1845 New York state law was a response to a dispute between landowners and tenant farmers who worked their land. New York City later grappled with this law during the 2011 Occupy Wall Street clash with protesters, some masked who took over a public park. At least 5 Occupy protesters were cited for violating the law then, according to Joe Coscarelli, writing in New York Magazine. There is no question. Masks afford anonymity. And so, since political protests might turn into confrontations with police or counter-protesters, why should we not strictly forbid their usage in these instances? Certain restrictions should not be considered unconstitutional impingements on free speech. One resonant example I think we can all get behind. In 1990, the Georgia Supreme Court reinstated a 1951 state ban on the Klan's hood-wearing during the Jim Crow era. To be sure, Antifa is not a movement or the malignant order of the Klan, but we need to recognize that the principle is the same. When particular groups are predisposed to violence, we have an obligation to strip them of their anonymity. And for those who claim their mask must be viewed as constitutionally protected free speech, recall the late journalist and social commentator Nat Hentoff, who aptly described this affliction as free speech for me, but not for thee. Well, spot on. He says, so if we demand our alt-right and neo-Nazis gather sans face covering, then that edict should apply to counter-protesters like Antifa as well. To consider anything less would be unconstitutional. Also keep in mind that masked anonymity shields provocateurs and protects them from identification and subsequent prosecution for criminal acts, like the assault on Andi Ngo. Unmasking these miscreants better positions society to hold them to account, or in the immortal words of early 20th century Supreme Court Associate Justice Louis D. Brandeis, sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Interesting argument. Maybe we'll come back to the rest, but that's basically the point I wanted to highlight. First, CNN. Wow. Calling for action against Antifa. That's pretty impressive because I didn't expect it to happen. But here we have, let me refresh this, a post from Harmeet K. Dillon, who is representing Mr. Andi Ngo with an update. She says, supporters of Mr. Andi Ngo, researching and suing individual, 1. Criminals who planned, supported, and executed felony assaults. Government actors who exacerbated, enabled assaults. And 3. Blue checkmark ilk, defamers, assault, journalists, deniers will take substantial resources. If you are a crypto Bitcoin holder and want to contribute, please DM or approach at law firm and I can provide wallet details. Otherwise, there is an online fundraiser for Andi here, which we should open up and take a look at. We are off to a good start, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. One can also send a check to my law firm noting that this is for the benefit of Mr. Andi Ngo's legal fund and will be placed in a trust for his legal cases. So far, where we're at with the Andi Ngo lawsuit, his initial fundraiser, last time I checked, is close to $190,000. Now, I'll stress this again. I've said it in the other videos. That may sound like a lot of money. It is, but Andi is suffering from a head injury, which may result in a recurring injury or chronic fatigue and other things that are going to require long-term medical care. 190 might not be enough. Additionally, however, I don't know how much they're trying to raise for their legal fund, but they've reached 16% of their goal. I will say, beyond unmasking Antifa, there is something that is way better, in my opinion. Arguing that the government has a right to demask people is, I don't know if the government has a right to tell you can't wear a mask, right? I understand it's in a specific circumstance, but I'll tell you what language do people speak better than English? The language of money. Go for their resources. A lawsuit can do just that. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do or otherwise, but I will say this. If you want to talk about effectiveness in stopping what Antifa is doing, who's funding the milkshakes? What organizations are collecting the funds? A lawsuit can expose this and also take those resources away. Further, the lawsuit can target the government in terms of protecting free speech and, forcing the police to actually do their jobs. But more importantly, it will go after the individuals who think they have a right to do this and can get away with it without being caught. So it's twofold. The masks are protecting their identities. Without the masks, it's easier to sue them. But lawsuits can also result in discovery and other things like that, and we can find out more about who these people are and what they're doing. So that's basically the update. CNN calling for unmasking, and Harmeet K. Dillon putting more pressure on the fundraiser they have for Andi Ngo. If you want to support him, it's up to you. I think we should be careful about a lot of the hyperbole that's been circling around about what happened, but for the most part, Andi was attacked. It is not justified. The violence should be called out, period. If you want to support him, Harmeet K. Dillon has the post up on Twitter, and, we'll see what CNN says or how the far left reacts to this, because now when you got CNN on board, you've lost the mainstream. It's just the fringe weirdos defending this. So stick around, more segments to come, and I will see you in a few minutes.